You guys started it. If you hadn't involved me in your political games, then I wouldn't be playing with you right now. But of course, this argument can be turned right back on Alex, and yet Alex chooses to blame the council because he doesn't want to take responsibility for his own descent into supervillainy. Alex, that is supervillain behavior! So, these books certainly got shaken up. And that was allowing the main character to kind of lose his moral compass. These books were really fun to read and kind of scary for Alex. Like, I felt for him going down this supervillain rabbit hole because these two books are so beautifully rich with implications and philosophy and character motivations and character growth, and we're going to get into all of it. Well, in the previous books, Alex was kind of Mr. Nice Guy, like he was trying real hard. But now is where he finally decides, we're taking off the kid gloves. There is no more Mr. Nice Guy. If we are enemies, I'm going to become as powerful as I can until I defeat you into the ground. Which, if it sounds excessive, it is kind of. But the brilliance of these books is you can totally understand where Alex is coming from. Because for all of these books, he has been tormented by various supervillains. He has been the underdog, and it has gotten him into so many nearly impossible situations over these books. And so when Alex finally puts his foot down, a part of me is like, you go, Alex. You deserve this. But then another part of me is going like, Alex, baby, don't give away your morals. You were the nice guy and that was a good thing. This isn't a bad thing. Why are you doing this? Why is it? Which means it's a good book. And another one of these seeds is between Alex and Richard's relationship. So Richard is his old master, and Richard is very evil. Richard has also been trying to recruit Alex since book 5, and Alex has always said, no way. And the reason he's been saying no way is because he doesn't want to become like Richard, which means ruthless, which is of course where Alex goes in this book. In book 10, Richard once again tries to recruit Alex, and this time it's like, hey, you join me and betray your friends, or I'm just gonna make you join me and betray your friends. And then this scene, so beautiful. I gotta compliment also the timing of the audiobook. It was so suspenseful and beautiful because Alex is like, I knew what I was gonna say, and it was the hardest word I had ever said. And then me as the reader, I was like, but what is he gonna say? Because at that point, he had started changing so much that I thought, he might just say yes. He might as well have some control over the situation, but is he going to stick to his guns of morality and say no anyway? And that is the descent of Alex Verus. He still sticks to his guns and rejects Richard, but by the end of the book, he's completely accepted Richard's ideology. Because in previous books, when Alex was rejecting Richard, he was rejecting all that Richard stood for here. But then by this book, he's at the point where he is accepting what Richard stands for, and he is only rejecting Richard out of this weird denial inside himself that he still thinks he's different. Which is why these two books, 10 and 11, serve as Alex's supervillain origin story. And Alex is justifying his actions in so many different ways. But in the end, he has still become the thing that he was fighting against just a few books ago. And that is what makes this so interesting to read. Because as the reader, do you support him in this or do you not? There is no one that is powerful in these books without being evil, with the exception of Arachne, who also skedaddles out of these books, which is kind of thematically awesome, honestly. If this is Alex's supervillain origin story, the question is he going to keep being a supervillain? Because his current quest is just to get enough power that no one can challenge him anymore. Where does that end? It doesn't, unless he gives up or dies. Now, we will go down the rabbit hole on a wonderful side tangent momentarily, which is the theory I have. So the turning point of book 10 is when Alex decides, no more Mr. Nice Guy, and he takes the Fate Weaver, this wonderful magical wand, which we'll also talk about in a minute, because I've got some ideas on that, and he kills the previous owner, and then he comes out and he is ready to slay a man. Now, where does Alex make this official choice, no going back now, to not be Mr. Nice Guy anymore? He makes this choice in Elsewhere, the dream universe, where we have been told your perception of yourself actually influences yourself. That if you imagined yourself with like an extra arm, you could actually come out of that dream world with an actual extra arm. So if Alex is making big decisions in this dreamscape, Could he actually be changing his own psyche? Like when everyone makes normal decisions, you're changing your psyche a little bit because you're making a decision about who you are, right? But if you're making a big life-changing decision about your personality in a place where your perception of yourself becomes reality, couldn't that be having way more consequences than he actually intended? I think it genuinely turned a switch in his personality. And I think in order for him to give up on this quest of amassing more power and going down the supervillain route, he will also have to make that decision to give up on the quest in Elsewhere. And ooh, can we talk about that scene when he first comes out of Elsewhere? Because that scene, I was listening to it in the audiobook, I just listened to the entire scene and then listened to the entire scene a second time because it was gorgeously violent and interesting and character growing and what even because he jumps out of Elsewhere right into a fight scene, the narration is beautiful because for most of the fight, the narration is totally calm. Well, Alex is destroying these opponents because he has this new magic wand, the Fate Weaver, which we will talk about because it has some weird ramifications on the plot. You can tell that Alex is darker because people in that fight try to surrender to him and he just kills them anyway. Alex, that is super villain behavior! And that is when it really sunk in that Alex is going 100% dark side. And let's explore what his justifications to himself are, because I think it's really fascinating, honestly, because there's a few little motivations there. And one of those is revenge for Anne's torture. So a few books ago, Anne got kidnapped and tortured on orders from the council. So whenever Alex and Anne are confronting council members in these books, they'll ask them like, hey, was it you that gave that order to kidnap and torture me? You get the sense that even though Alex and Anne are asking this question, they don't actually care about the answer anymore. Because though they like to pretend to themselves and to the people that they're hunting down and fighting that this is about revenge, that the other people started it, they don't actually care about the revenge at that point because what's more important to them at that point is playing the political game of eliminating their opponents. And that's the other thing that Alex uses as a justification for his war on the council, which is, you guys started it. If you hadn't involved me in your political games, then I wouldn't be playing with you right now. But of course, this argument can be turned right back on Alex, because many times in the beginnings of these books, he could have just gone on the run, and he could have been freed and done with all of these political games. He was the one who chose to continually involve himself until he was in so deep that he couldn't back off anymore. This cycle of escalation between Alex and the council could have been stopped by either of them. And yet Alex chooses to blame the council because he doesn't want to take responsibility for his own descent into supervillainy. And now we come to Alex's tool for supervillainy, the Fate Weaver. So the Fate Weaver, super powerful magic wand, Alex, total baller move, stabs it into his own stump of a hand. By the way, he also lost his hand in this book, and it becomes a new magical synthetic hand. Guys, which is a scene that I adored. And the thing is that the Fate Weaver was set up from book one as this super powerful, all the power thing. And then now, in these books, the Fate Weaver has limits. And I think this is a situation where the author here is trying to have his cake and eat it too. And I don't know how well it's actually working. Let me explain. So thematically, what does the Fate Weaver represent? The Fate Weaver represents this ultimate unrivaled power that is going to corrupt Alex. But then in practice, in the plot, it's not ultimate or unrivaled. So the Fate Weaver has been nerfed in order for it to not overbalance the plot. Because if Alex did have this ultimate unrivaled power, there wouldn't be that much plot tension left because he'd be unstoppable. He isn't the most powerful player on the board yet, and so his quest is not over. Side thing that is also inconsistent, Anne's djinn. So they set up the genie, the djinn, as wish granters. They can do pretty much anything. And then now, Anne has her own genie, and what does she do with it? Summon shadow monsters? Occasionally have something that's kind of like death magic with like force bladey stuff. Right? Because that also for Anne represented the ultimate unrivaled power that would corrupt her. And it is definitely corrupted her, but it hasn't been ultimate or unrivaled. I think if there was an actual genie at her command, granting whatever wishes she wanted, the plot would be done pretty quick. Or maybe get really complicated really quick, depending on how her wishes turned out. Like, that could be a really interesting plot, actually. But the point is, it makes sense plot balance-wise not to have these power-ups be all-powerful. But also, it feels like it cheapens their own thematic purpose in the story and makes it harder to tell the story that we were promised that it was gonna be. But let's talk about Alex and Anne for a second, because they got together when they were both the good guys. And now they are broken up, but they are both supervillains. And one of the things that I'm really excited for is to see if Alex or Anne turn good again. And I'm also excited to see whether or not they end up together again, because whether or not they turn good and end up together, kind of independent things. They could stay supervillains and end up being a power supervillain team. One of the reasons that I'm hoping that they come back, maybe not 100% to the light side, but like, you know, at least take a step back from that supervillain cliff, please, is because I think that'll be one of the hardest places for this story to go. Like, it'd be super easy to write the story where it's like, and then they ended up evil, but a story that is satisfying and yet also has them both kind of redeemed by the end, realizing the error of their ways in pursuing power above everything else, though that story would certainly be harder to write well. If it is written well, that story will be the best. The best crowning moment of this series of Alex's journey coming full circle. And I know, the thing that you've all been waiting for, what do these books get on their Fox scores? Well, book 10 gets a C+. Hermes showed up twice in this book, had brief interactions with Alex, was kind of satisfying, but, you know, incidental. Book 11, he gets a C. He was actually participating in an entire fight scene in book 11, but I don't feel like he also played a significant part, so these books do get lower Fox scores. At this point, I'm not really expecting Hermes to get a bigger role. I mean, I wish he had, and I think I'll just have to accept that. But we'll see. Who knows? Maybe Hermes will be the main character next book. It'll get an A+ on its Fox score. I mean, I'm hoping. Maybe Hermes will be the one in the end that convinces Alex not to be supervillain anymore. I'd be down for it. Let's see. Comment with a raised hand emoji in honor of Alex's beautiful new hand.